There was a period in my life when I couldn't watch interviews with successful people. Not because I disliked them. Quite the opposite. I'd watch someone talk about the company they built, the book they wrote, or the film they directed, and for about 20 minutes, I'd feel inspired. Then I'd close my laptop and walk into my own apartment, where the dishes still needed washing. Laundry was sitting on the chair that had unofficially become the laundry chair, and an idea I'd been postponing for 6 months was quietly waiting for me on my desktop. The inspiration would disappear almost immediately. What remained was a strange feeling I couldn't name. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't admiration. It was something closer to embarrassment, as if I'd somehow failed an exam nobody told me I was taking. The odd thing is that nothing in my actual life had changed during those 20 minutes. I still had the same job, the same friends, the same opportunities, the same unfinished book on my bedside table. The only thing that changed was the person I had decided to compare myself to. It's remarkable how quickly the mind can rearrange reality. Sometimes all it takes is one stranger on a screen, or someone from high school announcing an engagement, or a former colleague launching a business, or an old classmate posting photos from a country you can't pronounce. Suddenly, your perfectly ordinary Tuesday feels suspiciously inadequate. And I used to think the problem was comparison. People say that all the time. Stop comparing yourself. Reasonable advice, almost impossible to follow. The mind compares automatically. It compares salaries, faces, homes, followers, relationships, even grief. Somehow we can attend a funeral and leave wondering whether we're mourning correctly. Human beings are astonishingly creative when it comes to measuring themselves. So maybe comparison isn't the problem. Maybe the real question is why we care so much about the outcome. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I used to assume I wanted to do something meaningful because I was ambitious. Now I'm less certain. Sometimes I wonder if ambition and fear wear each other's clothes so often that they've forgotten which is which. The more I pay attention, the more I notice how often my drive appears alongside an uncomfortable thought. What if I never become anyone? Not anyone in the literal sense. I already am someone. I have people who know me, people who would notice if I disappeared. But that's not the fear. The fear is quieter. What if my life passes through the world without leaving much of a mark? I suspect many people carry that question around without ever saying it out loud. It hides behind productivity, behind perfectionism, behind overwork, behind the inability to enjoy an afternoon without feeling vaguely guilty that someone else is using theirs more efficiently. Maybe that's why resting can feel strangely uncomfortable. You're lying on the sofa watching the rain outside, and somewhere in the back of your mind, another version of you is apparently building an empire. Future versions of ourselves are fascinating creatures. Mine wakes up at 5 in the morning, exercises, reads philosophy, answers emails immediately, keeps plants alive, somehow cooks healthy meals without generating 17 dirty pans. I've never met this person, but I continue assigning them responsibilities. The strange thing is that no matter how much I accomplish, this imaginary version keeps moving further away. Finish one project, and they already have another waving. Reach one milestone, and they've quietly raised the standard. For years, I thought this meant I lacked gratitude. Now I think it might mean something else. Maybe the fear of being ordinary isn't really about ordinary at all. Maybe it's about disappearing. Human beings live with a peculiar piece of knowledge. We know our lives are temporary. Most days we don't think about it, thankfully. Otherwise, we'd never get through grocery shopping. But the awareness sits somewhere beneath everything. Quiet, patient. Like background music we've stopped consciously hearing, and perhaps part of us spends our entire lives trying to answer it, not with words, with proof. Proof that we mattered, proof that we existed, proof that our brief appearance here wasn't accidental background noise. There is actually a name for part of this idea. Psychologists call it terror management theory. The name sounds like the title of an action film, but the premise is surprisingly human. The theory suggests that because we're aware of our own mortality, we look for forms of symbolic immortality, things that allow a part of us to continue after we're gone. Children, art, careers, ideas, communities, legacies, even reputation. When I first read about it, I thought, that feels a bit dramatic. Then I caught myself checking whether anyone had liked something I'd posted online. Perhaps we're all a little more dramatic than we'd like to admit. And maybe that's why the modern world feels so exhausting. Because we've connected our deepest existential questions to metrics that refresh every few seconds. Visibility has become confused with significance. Attention has become confused with meaning. The algorithm quietly whispers that if enough people see you, you'll finally matter. But have you noticed how many visibly successful people still seem restless? How many people at the top continue climbing as if they're chasing something that keeps taking one step backward? Perhaps because significance was never hiding where they were looking. I keep coming back to a memory of my grandfather. He never wrote a book, never built a company, never had thousands of people listening to him. But years after he was gone, my family still repeated little things he'd said. The way he made tea, the stories he told, the strange habit of fixing broken things instead of replacing them. Yet somehow he remained. Maybe that's what unsettles me about my own fear of being ordinary. It assumes significance has to be witnessed, that a meaningful life must also be a visible one. I'm no longer convinced. Some of the most important people in my life changed me in rooms no camera ever entered. No applause, no audience, just presence. Perhaps the people who seem most at peace are not the ones who escaped being ordinary. Perhaps they're the ones who stopped treating ordinary as an insult. Because ordinary is where conversations happen, where children are raised, where friendships survive, where kindness quietly accumulates over decades, where lives are actually lived. If any of this feels familiar, maybe try something small after this video. Not a digital detox, not deleting every social media account, not reinventing yourself. Just sit with one question for a few minutes. If nobody could applaud it, would I still want to do it? You don't need an answer today. Sometimes the question itself clears more space than another 100 opinions. And perhaps that's enough. Perhaps a life becomes meaningful not when everyone notices it, but when the person living it finally does. Affirmation. I don't need the world to confirm that my life matters. I only need the courage to live it honestly, one quiet moment at a time.